We often hear about forgiveness in sermons and therapy cliches and well-meaning advice that's offered to somebody who's wounded. We hear about it through biblical and religious context. Forgive. For your own peace, forgive. And I feel that there's a coercion embedded in the way our culture talks about forgiveness, not mentioning that there are always two sides of the same coin, and one is the clarity and integrity of unforgiveness. The idea of forgiveness is presented as wisdom. It's presented as emotional maturity and even a kind of moral graduation. Oh, you forgave. You have forgiven? Good for you. And the injured person is told that true healing requires the deliberate cultivation of mercy toward the one who harmed them. But that message carries an unspoken implication that refusing to forgive is a sign of spiritual failure, a psychological failure, some type of lesser than state. I know that human experience tells a more complex truth. There are acts that rupture the fabric of a life so completely that the expectation of forgiveness becomes a burden. It's an additional burden placed upon the injured person. It's not a path to healing. When someone commits profound cruelty upon someone or betrays them or they're violent or they're abusive, the emotional aftermath is biological. The reaction is visceral. It's deeply rooted in the person's moral instincts. It's not merely a story that somebody tells themselves. The body registers injustice with the same seriousness that the body registers danger. So anger and grief and outrage are often portrayed as poisons that have to be purged for the sake of serenity. But in reality, anger and grief and moral outrage, these things frequently arise from something less talked about, which is a very intact moral compass. They are signals produced by a consciousness that recognizes harm and refuses to normalize that harm. We all have fundamental boundaries of human dignity, and when someone violates those fundamental boundaries of our dignity, the refusal to dissolve that violation into a gesture of forgiveness can actually be an act of integrity. An act of integrity. Now, forgiveness, when it emerges authentically, can of course be meaningful, and some people eventually experience it as a release, a transformation that arrives naturally over time. The difficulty begins when forgiveness is framed as an obligation rather than a possibility. And you can't manufacture emotional authenticity through pressure. You can't morally pressure somebody or obligate somebody into a state of authentic forgiveness. A person cannot command their inner world to feel mercy towards someone whose actions remain unrepented, unacknowledged, or devastating in their consequences. The demand for forgiveness does something else as well. It risks shifting the gravity of everything away from the wrongdoing itself. The moral gravity of what was done shifts from the act of harm towards the emotional posture of the person who was harmed, the person who suffered the wrongdoing. Now the injured party becomes responsible for demonstrating grace, composure, transcendence. Meanwhile, the original wrongdoing recedes into the background, and justice becomes secondary to just an appearance of spiritual elegance. And we're not doing that. In 2026, when this is being recorded, in a world that has partly gone to hell, just a smidge, and most humans are dysregulated. But of course, it's all falling apart to become something more glorious. A society that currently insists upon forgiveness, let's say as a universal requirement, it can be confusing moral clarity with something else, like emotional hostility, and they're not the same thing. A person, we know, can live a full, beautiful, meaningful life while maintaining a clear judgment, an enduring and clear judgment about what was done to them. And they can continue forward without extending absolution. Memory remains intact without the person being poisoned in every future moment that they ever live. Refusing to forgive, it doesn't trap somebody in perpetual rage, because human beings possess a wide range of emotional states beyond the simple binary of forgiveness, or that means bitterness. Forgiveness, or that means victimhood. Forgiveness, or that means resentment. Many people arrive at a steadier place that includes accepting a reality that took place, distancing themselves from the offender, and having a firm understanding that certain actions do stand outside the boundaries of moral repair. So it's not involving hatred. It is involving clarity, though. It's a clear understanding and judgment of what took place, and accepting the reality, distancing oneself from the offender, and remaining clear in the actions that stand outside those boundaries of moral repair. The language of forgiveness in our culture and society often promises liberation through some type of emotional erasure, and that's fake. We know liberation sometimes arrives through acknowledgement instead of erasure. Acknowledgement that harm occurred, and that the harm matters, and that some actions permanently alter the moral relationship between people. I mean, there's some people you're never talking to again, point blank. And such recognition honors the seriousness of the wrongdoing rather than dissolving the seriousness of the wrongdoing prematurely in the name of personal tranquility. Human dignity includes the freedom to decide how one relates to injury. For some, forgiveness does eventually grow from reflection, and it grows from empathy, or it grows from their spiritual beliefs. For others, moral fidelity, being true and faithful to your morals, requires remembering exactly what occurred, remembering it, and allowing that truth to remain unsoftened. And that's okay too. Neither path should be policed by cultural or familial or religious expectations that prescribe a single emotional destination. There is a strength in the refusal to counterfeit forgiveness. There's a strength. You don't have to counterfeit an act of forgiveness, and understand that respects the integrity of your inner life. It acknowledges that peace can't be forced. You cannot force peace into existence by moral slogans or burdens or obligations or expectations. Real healing emerges from honesty with oneself and the courage to hold moral truths without diluting them at all, and from the freedom to define your own relationship to the past. The world really doesn't become more beautiful, more benevolent, more peaceful and harmonious when victims feel obligated to absolve those who harmed them. Justice grows from accountability. Justice grows from recognition of wrongdoing. Justice grows from an offender being sincerely apologetic. And justice grows from the preservation of one's moral boundaries. Forgiveness may appear in some stories as a profound human achievement. Yes, definitely. In other stories, dignity resides in the clear statement, the unwavering statement that certain acts remain unforgiven. Both possibilities, forgiveness and unforgiveness, belong to the landscape of human experience. Only one of them requires honesty.